Hello students, today we will come to the works of Mies van der Rohe part 2. Again I will remind you that Mies van der Rohe was a German-American architect, one of the greats of the 20th century along with Frank Lloyd Wright, Le Corbusier and Walter Gropius, and his philosophy that really stood out was that of minimalism, less is more. He gave us, or he was the pioneer in the 20th century of the tall span and the long span building. This is one of his tall buildings in America. This of course is the Crown Hall in IIT Illinois, and the materials he worked with: steel, glass, stone, water and bricks. Let us come now to the German Pavilion. International Exposition was held in Barcelona, Spain in 1929. He designed the German Pavilion, one of his most famous buildings that at one time was pulled down, but it was re-erected again because of the architectural importance, heritage value of this building, and today it is kept preserved in its original form in Barcelona. It is a very small hall, or rather a small hall with a flat roof supported by columns, and it has got a minimalist and open plan using Mies's principle of less is more, with open flowing plan that is dissolving boundaries between inside and outside. And here we are reminded of F.L. Wright, who tried to do the same thing in his architecture, to remove that boundary that separates the inside from the outside. So we have a comparison here between the Rohe House by Wright and the Barcelona Pavilion. How space is in linear flow, how space flows linearly here also, and within and outside. Only difference is this house, the Rohe House by Mies van der Rohe, by Frank Lloyd Wright, is much more, let us say, a little more traditional. It has got Art Nouveau grill work on the windows. It has got little more American tradition in it. Whereas Mies van der Rohe's pavilion in the minimal steel and glass is very sleek and modern. It has got a floating roof and a horizontal emphasis. It is a flat roof that floats above these slender chrome columns you see here. And what do you observe? There are no beams. The beams themselves are embedded in the roof slab. So throughout he creates a feeling as if the roof is floating, just floating over these columns. These slender chrome columns have been given, and there is a sense of lightness and this emphasis on the horizontal space. All the walls are sliding walls. They are of stone, they are of glass, they are freestanding walls, they are not at all load bearing, and this helps us in a flexible space arrangement and seamless flow within the building. In fact, the walls somehow remind us of Japanese architecture's movable partitions called the fusuma. He uses luxurious material despite its minimal form. Like I told you earlier, he uses very rich and expensive materials like polished marble, green alpine, golden onyx, travertine, uses chrome and glass, emphasizing both texture and elegance in this building. So the building is minimal, but its materials are very high-end, very sleek and polished appearance. The minimalism is also in the way he arranges the chairs. He actually designed the Barcelona chair in this exposition, and that became famous all over the world. But the interesting part is how he places these two chairs in a very large space, and that speaks to me, that speaks a lot about minimalism. That how difficult minimalism is, how difficult it is to keep on eradicating all that is superfluous, to leave behind only that which is the most essential. I will repeat that again. It is to how to keep on eradicating all that is superfluous till you are left with all that is the most essential. The important part is to identify that which is superfluous, and that becomes very difficult. When we start looking at a building or a project or a design that you are doing or I am working on, we start looking at things that seem to us to be vitally necessary to be there in the project. But Mies was able to go beyond that and remove and eradicate everything that was superfluous. Of course, this kind of thought was also widely criticized. I am not saying that there are not people who are on the opposite side of the spectrum, but let me tell you in a very simple way how difficult it becomes. Suppose you are in a classroom which has a capacity of 60 students. There are 60 chairs, 60 tables in it. This is a neutral space. It can be arranged and rearranged in many ways. So you've got these 60 students, and there are not many ways in which you can lay out the chairs in that space for 60 people. And so the job is easier. And then I say, remove all these 60 chairs. Now you've got 2 chairs and 2 tables. Now arrange them in this hall. You imagine how difficult it becomes. In that large hall, where there's ample space, and you have to only arrange 2 tables and 2 chairs. Because wherever you place them, they will define the room. With those 60 tables and chairs, the definition was easy. There were a lot of constraints, we couldn't do much with it. Now we can do a lot, but we don't know exactly what to do, how to place them. The right placement will make the space exquisitely beautiful, very well arranged. Any wrong placement, even slightly off the correct place, will completely damage the view of the room. When we look at the Barcelona pavilion and the way the chairs have been kept, this will become clear to you. Please go back and look at more pictures of the interiors of the Barcelona pavilion to understand what I just told you. These are some of the snaps of Barcelona pavilion to show you how horizontal the building is. Doesn't it remind you again of the brick country house? So the idea that he had developed earlier in the brick country houses is now getting reflected in the Barcelona pavilion. So what does it teach us? What do we learn when we go through the works of Wright and Corbusier? That they build on their ideas that they have learnt earlier. When Wright begins by breaking the box in the Winslow house, he keeps on working on it and keeps on polishing it. And the ideas that become crystallized in front of him, he then repeatedly uses them. Corbusier does the same thing. Having identified those elements that make sense, that work well in his design, he repeatedly uses them. Like for example, having a pilotis and lifting the building on the pilotis. He does that in the United Habitation. He does that in Monastery La Touré. He does that in the buildings of Chandigarh. He does that in the Sanskar Kendra, in the Government Museum in Chandigarh, in the Tokyo Museum in Tokyo. He repeatedly does that. He does that in this building he did in Switzerland, which was before, I believe, the United Habitation. So all these great architects develop a repetitive palette. And in the case of Mies van der Rohe, it became an extreme thing. How so? The 5 or 6 materials I identified for you in the beginning continued to remain the same right till the end of his career. His buildings, some of them look very, very similar, but one thing stands out. They are his buildings. It is not, you will easily be able to identify a Mies building while looking at it, just as you can do for Corbusier or Frank Lloyd Wright. That signature is there, as I talked to you a couple of lectures back. This Barcelona pavilion is a modern classic. It became an icon of modern architecture, showcasing structure, clarity and space ideally in Mies's work. This is a comparison between these long drawn horizontal forms. We have it in Barcelona Pavilion 1929. This is Mies's own house design, the Tugendhat house in 1930, and this is the Goitzwinkler house by Frank Lloyd Wright in 1940. I had earlier also compared this house with the Barcelona Pavilion in the way the roof is cantilevered over the house, very similar to some the way the roof is overhanging in Barcelona Pavilion. Then came the Tugendhat house, one of the most famous houses of the 20th century that he did in 1930. Today it's a UNESCO heritage project, a landmark of modernist residential architecture that he built in the Czech Republic. This house is now a World Heritage Site by UNESCO. Open plan and free flowing space. Interior is defined by openness. It is having a steel frame structure, one of the first residential houses to have a steel frame and eliminates the need for load bearing walls. These are the drawings of the Tugendhat house. It's in different levels, as you can see. It's on a hillside, and this house is embedded on the hillside. The first house to use this modern steel skeletal frame with thus able to provide these open plan interiors. This is the steel frame being erected in the house, and he also integrated the furniture into the architecture, something that Frank Lloyd Wright also used to do. The furniture, this is custom furniture used in the house, designed by Mies van der Rohe. Many architects have done that. When they were given a project, that project was done holistically. The entire thing, including the furniture, including all the fittings, etc., were all done by the one architect. Of course, the most famous amongst such approaches was Frank Lloyd Wright. There is Alvar Aalto also, who designed quite a bit of furniture, and then even Mies did that. This is some of the pictures of the Tugendhat house. You can see how open, how much natural light floods into the building. This is another thing with this open plan interior. It has the advantage of flooding in a lot of natural light, so much needed in the Western Hemisphere. Now we compare similar houses of the modernist movement, and in this comparison, which I have kept here in front of you, it shows the rise of the modernist movement. If we take Eames House by Charles and Ray Eames, this is in 1949, this is slightly off the curve, though it's modernist, but it's built out of factory material. It's got asbestos sheets, steel frame, etc. But if you compare Richard Neutra's Lovell House, 1929, this is the interior, or this E1027 house by Eileen Gray, and this is the interior, we see that they are all coming to white planar geometry, glass, unornamented surfaces. So many buildings by these architects are all being built in the same kind of basket. Or again we compare Rohe, Tugendhat, Schrader House, Villa Savoy. Again the comparison between Fallingwater and Tugendhat House, both in the 1930s. The interiors of this, so here when we see this curved wooden wall which has the dining room area, which is here, this is how it is. This picture shows you that, and this picture shows you the staircase. As you go down, you enter in at a level where you park the car, then you come in and you go down the level. When you go down, then you reach the main living room space. Then we have the IIT Illinois in Chicago. When he landed in America, he got a teaching assignment in IIT Illinois, and there he ended up designing 20 buildings on the campus. He gave them a completely new kind of architectural vocabulary for America and particularly for IIT Illinois. He defined the campus's modernist look and built buildings like the Crown Hall, one of his most famous work. So several of the buildings he designed here, and see how similar they are. This kind of unity in his buildings will always be there. Crown Hall, Alumni Hall, Pearlstein Hall, Chapel, all of them have that unified appearance. Coming to the Crown Hall, it is an icon of modernism, a masterpiece which has got one idea which I will expand upon later, the universal space. An open column-free space that can have a multiple use, and it is very simple architecturally, simple in steel and glass with minimal design, and this is the universal space of the Crown Hall. You can have it with seating, you can have it with architectural tables, drafting tables, you can have an exhibition, you can have a different kind of exhibition, or you can have this completely open plan, open floor like this. So this idea of universal space started taking root in the mind of Mies van der Rohe, and several buildings he did later on where he continued using the concept of the universal space. There is abundant natural light here because of the extensive glass, and there is flexible functionality. There is also classical symmetry. Now that is one very interesting thing about the modernists. Modernists withdrew from the past. They completely broke away from the past architecture, and yet we find in their work the influence of classicism. There is symmetry, there is proportion, there is harmony. So, if we compare this Crown Hall with an earlier 19th century work by Carl Friedrich Schinkel called the Alte Museum, you find that essentially both the buildings have a very similar symmetrical form. This of course is in stone and heavy material, very close spaced columns. This is in steel and glass. This has got girders on the top. Why girders on the top? If you look inside, this is like the Barcelona pavilion, there is no beam on the inside. The girders, these are inverse beams that he has provided here, and we have seen that fortunately even on the IIT campus there are a couple of buildings that have got inverse beams in them, and this interior is so free flowing as compared to the Alte Museum. Now modernist architects were still influenced by these classical principles, like I said, of symmetry, proportion and harmony. You find classical axial symmetry in Villa Savoy like in the Parthenon, and you find that again very strong axial symmetry in the Crown Hall. Other buildings were also built here, like the Grover Hermann Hall by Skidmore, Owings and Merrill, and again the Galvin Library by Skidmore, Owings and Merrill 1962. But what they did was they continued with the original vocabulary of Mies van der Rohe. For example, the way the steel is black facade, not in any other color, and the way the entire building is composed, and there are these inverse beams that have been provided like in the Crown Hall. This is the Grover Hermann Hall, the Galvin Library. So the Miesian language is continued even in the interiors. They have respected that when they extended the campus. So we will end here, and I will continue from here to the next part of Mies van der Rohe when we look at his later buildings. Thank you.